And then also it was a form of prayer for me to deal with the loss of my unborn child.
Welcome back to the What's the Dill podcast. We have another great interview today. We have Matthew Chiquin on with us. Now, you might actually know him, a lot of you out there. You might actually recognize some of his work. He has a blog and an Instagram page called The Simple Catholic. And I know I've followed it for years. I know a lot of you out there follow. I see your mutuals. I see we have mutuals on his page. So he is known as The Simple Catholic online. We connected online a couple this past week, and we're really, really excited to have him on to talk about his work, his life, and what he does with the Simple Catholic. So Matthew, welcome. Thank you for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, Pete.
Yeah, so exciting. So just want to jump right in. First and foremost, I'd love to hear a little bit about your story growing up, how you encountered the Lord. Like, how did you come to know the Lord? Were you a cradle Catholic? Are you a convert?
Yeah, great. So I am a cradle Catholic. My parents really did a great job of showing me the love of Christ, just in the ordinary life, taking us to Mass, the love that they shared between each other in their marriage and how they parented us. It just, I mean, neither of them have any theology degrees. I don't ever remember them really talking much in the particulars about the faith. I think we prayed a rosary maybe once a month. My mom would take us to Stations of the Cross during Lent. That was the thing that I really learned to love that devotion, especially. And
Mm-hmm.
she would, volunteer at the churches too. And my dad was just very patient. He only got mad one time that I can remember, which I personally have failed, as a dad. I there's no way I could have met that goal, but so he's someone I always look up to. For that, he just was so patient, with us, and I never really saw them. I mean, they might have fought just once or twice, but they always did a great job of being like loving witnesses to the faith, and I never felt the need to ask why we go to church or why do we have to go to church. It's like they just showed us, and it was a habit, and I think
Yeah.
that's how I met Christ. And then I had a deeper conversion in my adulthood, but they laid a great foundation for me.
That's incredible. The example of parents really is such a key role in our church. So where did you go to college? Did you go to college? Did you have any schooling? Did you study theology?
Yes. So I am from Sioux City, Iowa, which is a really small town on the tri-state area of Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota. It's where they intersect. That's where Sioux City is. And there's a college there called Briarcliff University. And I received my undergraduate there in history, and then I later pursued a master's degree in theology from Franciscan University. I received that through the distance learning program, as I was still able to live in my hometown, and then so that's kind of my schooling, and then I've gained various experiences teaching. I've served as a catechist before I had kids, and that then I just kind of developed more devotions to the saints and read their works, and that's kind of my continuing education. Right now, my what that kind of looks like for me in the last like 2 or 3 years is the Ascension podcasts. So now I'm up to those three: the Catechism, the Bible, and the Rosary in their podcast. Those are my daily readings or listenings. So it's a way that I try to reinforce the Catholic faith. And even though I know a lot of it already as being a cradle Catholic, I still want to have that foundation where I can still make sure I'm precise enough when I speak, or I'm very careful before I share things to be in alignment with the Catechism. And those podcasts are just really helpful for me.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna be levitating by the end of the year. All three of those podcasts, you're gonna be floating up to heaven, bro. Yeah, I think that's a great point about kind of having to continue education. I've actually really been convicted of that myself, about continues to learn our church, our teachings, the Bible, because it's amazing how much then when I just let my own thoughts, opinions go, that I kind of start basing my faith on what I think about the world, not what the church thinks about the world, how God has revealed himself in the Bible. So
Mhm.
I love that you do that, man.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to jump into some of your work that you do online. The Simple Catholic, very popular blog, very popular online. You've really brought a lot of people to have a better perspective on the faith, and I think brought a lot of people into faith through some of your work online. So tell me about the Simple Catholic, how you started it, why you started it. Yeah, I'd love to hear about it.
Sure. Thank you. So I started in 2015 in the springtime, and that was near the end of my when I was teaching at a Catholic school, and that was a very tough year for a variety of fronts. Not only was it a new job, teaching whenever you are a new teacher in any whether it's the first year of teaching or starting at a new location, you're always learning new curriculum. So you're almost like barely waiting. You're barely like above the surface in terms of how far ahead you are. But there were so many other things that God
Mm-hmm.
allowed me and my wife to suffer that year that really forged us and deepened our faith. The first was this was the first chance. So we moved to a different city. We moved to South Dakota. And this is the first time that we had to look for daycare. My mom was watched our kids, our first two kids, in my hometown,
Mm-hmm.
and we went with the daycare provider, and we were still very new with it. But then there was some signs of things that weren't like it was signs of abuse going on. So we had to pull him out like within 2 months from the start of the school year, and so that was the first like major. He declined in a lot of his speech. He was reading books at a really young age, and he was decreasing his progress in his speech. And then thankfully we were able to find a new daycare provider that was just she was Catholic. She was very um, patient and just a great mother figure. And then we had a miscarriage, the first of two like really horrific miscarriages that were like into the early second trimester, and that was in November of that year.
Sorry.
And then we had a bunch of medical issues for my daughter. She has had a lot of ear problems, and she has partial hearing loss. Had to have a couple surgeries repairing an eardrum, and that year was the first of the start of all of those things. She had a lot of ear infections, um, which that's there's just kind of unavoidable. It's just that's what she had to go through.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there was all these things that just were allowed in tandem in a short amount of time, and that deepened my faith. And my blog was born out of the fruit of two things: the desire to teach, things that I learned as a first year teacher, things that I brought from when I was a catechist that I knew worked, and things that I didn't have a chance to actually like test out or showcase to my students. And then also it was a form of prayer for me to deal with the loss of my unborn child. My wife was immediately like stricken with it because she directly was impacted with it because she physically was impacted, emotionally, everything. And for me, I felt like it was almost like a delayed reaction where it wasn't until like
Mm-hmm.
months down the road that I was able to actually deal with the emotions. Um, and so then at that point, I was just started writing things out, and I wrote several posts regarding that. And so I remember in 2015, we were trying to get pregnant. We were like, do we do this? Do we not? We don't want to have the loss. So I just remember in that moment, in such pain, I told my wife, I want something good to happen in my life. And that
Mm-hmm.
was, then we found out we got pregnant a week later. And then we
Wow.
decided on the name Josiah. And his name,
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know the meaning of the name. We just liked the name.
Mhm.
And his name translates to healer.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that was a huge sign where it's like, God was giving us consolation. And so with that, I kind of just wrote more on that. And, and then we had another miscarriage in 2017. And that was also very painful. But the benefit was I already had the loss in 2014. So it was,
Mm.
that was kind of like my spiritual anchor moment,
Mm-hmm.
where it's a moment. And I don't know if this is a term I think I just coined up the other week, where it's like it's a spiritual anchor moment where your lowest point, it's like rock bottom, but you always return back to that. And because you either any moment from now to the rest of your life, it's going to be not as bad as that spiritual anchor moment, or you'll find a new spiritual anchor moment which is going to deepen your faith even more if you allow it.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's really, really powerful, powerful story. And it's incredible that you use that suffering, that spiritual anchor for good and to draw closer to Christ because we know how hard those moments of suffering can be. So, really inspiring that you can do that. You and your wife did that. So, when did you see the transition from writing it out on your blogs onto to Instagram?
I started seeing with the whole politics thing in 2016 how Catholics on both sides of the spectrum were kind of acting not in full alignment with Christ. And so I learned at that moment was a point of like clarity for me where it's like, okay, I ceased calling myself a devout Catholic. The only adjective I applied myself was like, I'm just Catholic. I'm simply the Catholic. So that's the first reason for the simple Catholic. And the second reason was because my son, my oldest son, was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder in
Mm-hmm.
2014. And I learned what that meant was it's a social communication disorder. So I had to basically be
Mm-hmm.
super clear with like every single step of every direction. And so I went from like it was this weird transition from I just finished obtaining my master's degree in theology, and had all these ambitions of being like a professor at a university, and that might still be a end goal, but and I had those goals of kind of like being almost like a mini professor at the high school. But I learned I had to simplify my teaching
Mm-hmm.
approach, not only to my students but to my kids. And so that was the
Mm-hmm.
second reason where the Simple Catholic blog made sense. I had made the change
Mm-hmm.
officially in 2017 to my blog, and
Okay.
then that's when I started my Instagram account as well. And I started it originally because um, I wanted to get people to go to my blog and grow there. But then from there, I
Mm-hmm.
just started posting 3 times a day. I watched a video of someone who said, like, if you want to grow your account, you want to be consistent, post 3 times a day. And then I had almost like these guardrails. You might call them brand guidelines. I never systematized them, but it's something I always do. I run it through the filter. Is it inspiring, funny, informative, and is it orthodox?
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that I like run it through. Um, and I've shed any adjective to describe myself. Some people might call me conservative. Some people might refer to me as like a traditionalist Catholic. And there might,
Mm-hmm.
but for me, I've stopped calling myself that because the church we're just Catholic. We should believe
Yeah.
every official teaching of the church. We're Catholic. I'm just Catholic. And
Mm-hmm.
and I understand why people, attach maybe labels, but for me, it wasn't helpful because I would, you know, then I got into the weeds with debates, and I didn't want to do that. So this is a way
Right.
to help my own mental health and me as a family man, husband, father, and as a writer, I basically honed in on that. So as I became a parent, like I don't have time to be sitting in the weeds with the moral issues. I always run through, like I always have these posts where I say, I believe every official teaching of the church. So then people know where I stand. Like I'm in full alignment with the church,
Mm,
but I have found that it's not helpful to me and my readers. Like I'm able to connect with them through the humor, through various posts that aren't maybe obvious or like um I try to highlight various aspects of saints, and I've also been trying to be intentional about reaching out to people that are on the periphery and like that
mhm,
are either lapsed Catholics or like people that are sympathetic to our faith. And then from that
mhm,
I was sharing humor and it just kind of grew more than I thought, and then it just became part of my life. And
mhm.
I've been doing Instagram for like 8 years now, and basically the rule for my posting is I try to post 3 times a day, and that's kind of it. That's how it grew.
I think humor is such a great way to be the first touch point for getting someone into the faith. You can't just start with the Summa Theologica. You can't just start with the catechism. You have to like start on the foundation. And sometimes that foundation is just feeling like you're invited into the community, into the walk with the Lord, having someone help you
Hmm.
along and to have a soft heart and open eyes and clear eyes and open ears. Humor is a great way to start that. And I'm sure, and I want to ask you this, has there been people who has reached out to you and said, didn't know what I thought about the faith. I came to your blog, I came to your Instagram, and it set me on the path to learn more. Has that happened?
Yeah, there's been some people. It's been, I've had people just say that, and I don't know how many there were, but there was there's people that they reach out to me and they ask me questions. There was one guy who was
Mm-hmm.
comfortable. Now he wasn't quite as like as friendly and maybe open to converting now as some of the others, but he was open enough to tell me that his parents made him feel like going to mass was a chore. And he did not
Mm,
believe in the real presence for whatever reason when he was even 13. And he's now, I think, 20.
mm,
Um, and the way he was phrasing it, his parents didn't seem to take the faith seriously or going to mass as they
mm-hmm.
should. But they said, you still have to go to mass with us. And I just basically
Mm-hmm.
empathized with him. I said, first of all, I'm sorry that you felt your parents treated you in that way where you didn't feel like your answers were, given adequately. I still assured him, said that, we still believe as Catholics that it's the real presence. Um, but I just basically kind of asked him questions like, where are you at? And I left the door open for him. I said, if you have any other
Mm-hmm.
questions about the faith, please feel free to message me. And I have my email address on
Yeah.
my profile too, where I've had some people message me as well, various questions, and they're at different points of the journey as well. Um, but he
Mm-hmm.
even admitted, he's like, thank you for at least being understanding and open. I didn't expect someone to be like
Yeah.
that. So I try to come at it from
Yes.
that way. And I think being a parent has helped me become more. It's basically humbled me and gotten me off my high horse that I was on when I was in my early 20s.
That's great, man. I love to hear that. So you've also kind of mentioned humor. You've mentioned The Office. What is your favorite Office episode and why is it Dinner Party?
Why is it Dinner Party? Well, it's not Dinner Party, but that is a good episode. It's probably a few Threat Level Midnight or AARM,
Okay.
or the one with the mafia. That's another one. Um,
Oh, oh yeah. If the
Basketball.
salad comes on top, I send it back.
Yes, exactly. The basketball, simply because I love watching. You know, I like playing basketball. I just like the fact that it's still very funny, but it has that like a game in there, and I like it. It's a good one. Diversity Day is a great one too in healthcare. But probably Threat Level Midnight.
Yeah. Okay. Agent Michael Scarn.
Yeah.
Strong choice. Strong choice. I love
Yep.
that. Yeah, it's a great shot. I loved it too. I can't believe it's like 20, almost 20 years old from when it started at this point. I can't even believe that.
Yes, yes, and I've watched it probably 200 times.
Like every episode?
Yes, I just
For real? 200 times.
around two. Yeah, I mean I've lost track at this point, but I have. Yeah, I'm now at the point where I'm looking in the background of every scene and finding internal inconsistencies, but I'm like looking past the characters and looking in the background of just in of any part, like whether it's like just a corner of the wall, like looking at a stack of paper, or a passerby going that I didn't notice before. Um, I'm not yet at the point where I
Yeah.
watch them based off of who's produced them or who is the director for that episode, but it's going to probably be at the point where I'll organize them based off of who watch them in that order. So
Okay, so you please tell me you've like won some office trivia at a bar or something. You please tell me you've done that at least.
I've not done that. I worked overnights for a while when our fourth child was born. Our daycare provider retired, so my wife is a teacher, so it made more sense for me to. I
Hmm.
could still do my freelance work. So I really haven't. I'm
Hmm.
finally getting reacclimated with like society. It seems like in my actual community, because now I can work like daytime hours.
Hmm.
But well, I have a few office board games. I have an office Clue. I have an office trivia game. I have an office and I get most of those right. But I'm kind
I
of
love it.
balancing
I
it.
love it. That's great.
Yeah, but I'm also balancing like my obsession with Catholic theology with that. So there are some, as I learn about more and more saints, I sometimes will have to table some of the office stuff for a bit.
That's great. I love that you're such a super fan. So one thing I learned a little bit in researching some of your background when I was going to have you on here was you talk openly about having ADHD. And I wanted to ask you about how you've seen the Lord work in your life with that, because I feel like there are people out there that maybe don't have an understanding of ADHD, and maybe someone has ADHD and they don't really know how the Lord is working with them in it. So I'd love to hear your kind of thoughts on it and how God has met you with having ADHD.
Sure. It's I was diagnosed I think when I was like 7 or 8. I was like every kid is hyper, but like I was just very hyperactive, and it eventually I
Hmm.
had to go on medicine to help me focus in school because I was just like all over the place. And the thing with ADHD is you have this ability to hyper focus on like things that you're very interested in, and maybe that's why I'm super like focused on Catholic theology or The Office, where I can just like zone, have like a tunnel vision. But for me, it's like I've always had to do multiple things at once or bounce from task to task, which when I have the right mindset, I can juggle those. But like it is easy to be to struggle with some of that time management. Um,
Hmm.
when always read like 8 books at a time, and I don't know if that's the reason
Mm.
why I always felt the need to like I'm like interested in this book and like to a point, and then it's like I got to read another book, start another book, and then do that. And for a bit, I thought it was. I never really. I didn't even know the word neurodivergent until like maybe 6 years ago, 5 years
Mm.
ago. I'm not exactly sure when. I didn't even know there was like a big movement or, um, it's. I
Mhm.
use it now because I think it's more the official term. I'm still very much not like a expert, but it it really came to more. I paid more attention to it and kind of embraced it as someone who who has ADHD. I feel like I've struggled with like calming myself down and like always want. I could do things pretty quickly and accomplish tasks, and I would be impatient with others who were slower. Um, but then also like that a lot that led to other things that like if I was quickly doing something, I might have missed a key step. And with my boys, they both have ADHD. My older son is especially like more He's like a carbon copy of me. My younger son is also on the autism spectrum. He was
Okay.
more on the severe side, and so it helped. It basically his autism like co- gave me the chance to slow down. And like I've interacted with
Mm,
other people that I've learned have had autism, and those that like I've some of the people I interact with online, like there's a few followers that are also autistic. I've learned that the ADHD mind is a way, like it understands autism in a way that maybe the regular world can't. And I'm not exactly sure why
mm,
that is. The thing that I've experienced is it feels like someone on the autism spectrum can help slow me down. Like I'm forced to slow down
mm,
to meet them at their level. And that's been so beneficial. And then I've really leaned into like my ADHD as a way where I can like create a bunch of content or like share a bunch of content in a short time. But then I
yeah.
also have to almost get recharged back up. So like I've had to learn to be
Okay.
strategic with my creative lightning rod moments. And I've learned that I have to, exercise is key for me. Listening to positive music, like
Hmm.
Christian music, has helped me directly. Being very
Hmm.
intentional in my prayer and, reading is very helpful. Um, you know, the
Hmm.
the thing with an ADHD mind is like we want to have this immediate dopamine rush, and so it's like I have
Mm,
to be very cognizant of how I engage on social media and how I scroll, and like it's something I have to constantly work on, and it's something that I will never. It's part of me, so it's never something I'm gonna like
yeah.
get rid of, but it's something I've learned to kind of manage, I guess.
That's really powerful, Matthew. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I know people here who are listening to this or watching this are going to resonate with that. There's someone out there that's going to really resonate with your story. One of the kind of final little question I wanted to get into. Just wanted to ask you about anything you see of like in our church right now. You're like, how can we um, either reach out better to people who are maybe fallen away Catholics, or how can we be more open? Like, what would you say? Because you said you had a lot of people who are on the peripheries of the faith. So, what would you say to them right now? Like, what's a message you would say to them? Like, hey, you know, we're here for you. Or I don't know. What would you say to those on the peripheries of the faith or fallen away from the faith?
Yes, you're welcome. If anyone hurts you that's in the church, I I as the representative of the church apologize deeply. And there's been in July this year there was I don't want to get too much into it, but I was hurt very very deeply by someone that I trusted in my local church, and in a prominent space of authority. And so I understand why people leave when they're hurt by the church, especially members of like the hierarchy of the church. um so that's the first thing, and then the second thing, the thing that I would encourage like Catholics that are listening that want to reach out to someone. um Bishop Barron said beauty is the arrowhead of evangelization, and what that means is we should invite them to the beauty of our faith. And what that can look like in a tangible form is inviting your friends over for maybe a poker night, board game night, watching the game, having just drinks and dinner, and having them be in an environment where our homes are meant to have be a domestic church. And so that means we're meant to have sacred images on the walls of Christ, the Blessed Virgin Mary, Joseph, the saints, other key images in the Bible, and maybe even statues as well. Um, I have been intentional about inviting one of my friends, having him over for a board game night. Sometimes I have him with other groups. Sometimes with scheduling, it's just us two. I invite him to my house. I don't, my house is filled with sacramentals and beautiful images, of the church. I occasionally talk a little bit about what's going on with my work, um, if he asked, and it is directly related to the faith. I don't spend too much time on it unless he shows further interest. Um, but we just have this, and I am very clear with like telling him like I appreciate your friendship, and I've whether that's in the text message was leading up to us getting together for a board game night or when he's there, and I look him in the eye and say thank you for being a good friend, and thank you for bringing these cool board games over, and thank you for just having this fellowship. And my goal, and I've been in the other thing too, is I'm intentional with how I pray. So I specifically pray for him by name, wanting him to be introduced to the faith and giving me the courage and having the opportunity to actually be explicit, or finding the wisdom to then, how do I go from where I'm at now to where I explicitly start teaching him and catechizing him. And I ask people on Instagram occasionally, or some people and through private message, to pray for him and pray for me as I walk with him. And the thing is, we should find one person. If everyone found one person to walk with for a year, we would, how much would our RCA programs grow in the years to come? Walk with one. Andrew invited Peter. James invited John. It was just one person at a time. And then from there, it maybe went to two people at a time. But walk with one and be explicit in your prayer. Have a laser focus of prayer. Because prayer is really our connection to God. And he knows what's in our mind. But if we can be explicit, there's something extra powerful when it comes to like thinking that specifically, or even externalizing it in words, or putting it on paper or typing it out. So that's, I think, would be the thing I would tell those that are wanting to invite people in. And then those that are watching that are, on the fringes, that, maybe considering Catholicism, but have been hurt. Again, as the official, I'm not the official representative, but as someone who's a member of the church, I apologize for them. Direct any questions to me if you have any concerns. If you want to cry out to the Lord and yell at him at this point, it's okay, because prayers of lament are still a prayer. Our goal is to not continue for prayers of lament forever, but it's okay to occasionally be at this point of a lament towards God. Why did this happen? He'll eventually give you the answer, but sometimes he wants you to cry out to him.
Amen, man. Amen. Well said. Very powerful, and definitely something we can all learn from. So appreciate you sharing that answer. And I mean, if you're listening to this and you're feeling like something in your heart is telling you to reach out to Matthew, I mean, do it. I would say, right? Like, I'm sure you're open, Matthew, to have someone reach out to you and walk with them even a little bit, even if it's just a convo and a private message.
Yeah.
And whether it's Matthew or someone else, yeah. So there you have it right here. Like Matthew said, he's open. If there's someone else that you see, reach out to them. Because I love that idea of, if we all walked with one person for a year, how different our church would be. So that means great.
Yes,
well
it is.
said,
And I've had people like
great goal.
message me. Yeah. I've had people message me and they're like, some of them are like, I'm sorry to bother you and stuff. It's like, you're not bothering me. I invite people to ask me questions. I might not get to it right away, because if it's, bedtime or getting, supper ready for the kids, I might be delayed in a bit, but I always check my messages. And, if you have any questions about the faith, I can provide answers to maybe something I wrote down, or direct you to some resources that can better answer it than even myself. So yeah, I welcome those
Incredible.
questions.
Absolutely. Love to hear that. Awesome. Well, Matthew, This has been great to talk to you. It's been great to get to know you. It's been great to hear more about your perspective on life, your perspective on the faith. I appreciate you sharing and appreciate you being open and willing to share about these things in your life. I feel like we covered a lot, from mental health to the office. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today.
Yes, thanks, Pete. Thanks for being so quick to when I reached out the other week. To be quick to respond. Yeah, thank you again for having me.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, man. Yeah, I'm also feeling that same pull to kind of reach out, be proactive with getting people on the podcast and just connecting with other people. So happy that we could make this work. For all you out there, make sure you like, subscribe to this podcast, share with someone you think might hear it, like it, enjoy it. Make sure you also go follow The Simple Catholic, his blog on Instagram, Facebook, very funny stuff, a lot of great stuff on there all the time. So I know you'll enjoy it. So that's it for me today. I appreciate you guys so much. Matthew, thank you for coming on. All of you, I'll talk to you later.